One night, I heard some noise outside my front door. When I went to investigate, I saw a man's face through the door window. He looked very dirty, and there was drool running down his chin. He was staring at me, his heavy breathing fogging up the glass. He then started laughing and knocking on the door, frantically. I was thoroughly creeped out and rushed to call 911. The guy just kept banging on the door. When I looked again, I noticed he wasn't using his fists. He was using his head, slamming it against the window, over and over and over. He kept at it, madly, almost the whole time while I was waiting for the police. The glass was starting to crack, and he was bleeding from his nose and forehead. Unfortunately, just before the police arrived, he left. I hoped that would be the end of it, but no. Later that night, I woke up to a loud noise. It was the same guy, hitting his head on another window on my house. There were small shards of glass sticking out of his head. There was blood all over his face. The window was nearly completely shattered. Then I noticed he was handcuffed. Perhaps he was a criminal who had gotten away from the police. I ended up calling the cops on the spot again and hid in the bathroom. The guy must have eventually run out of windows to break and got into the house. He wound up behind the bathroom door and started slamming his head against it. I was afraid he'd break the door too. That's when I heard the sound of sirens. The police had arrived. The banging stopped. They found him collapsed in front of the bathroom door, with pieces of broken glass and splinters of wood stuck on his face. The man was immediately taken to the emergency room at the nearest hospital. However, he had suffered a serious concussion and other damage to his brain, and fell into a coma. He still has not awakened. Until he does, there will be no answers as to why he was banging his face on my door that night.
One day, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my mom had gone to my older sister's recital in Georgia, and my dad was at work. He was a pilot for some airline. So she left me and my older brother, who was only 12 at the time, at the sitter's house, which was a few blocks away from my house. My sitter, who I'm gonna call Bev, was 19, and she was pretty much the best kind of sitter to a 6 to 7-year-old boy could ask for. She'd let us play games and stay up watching TV, as long as we didn't bother her while she was on the phone with her boyfriend. We were watching TV, and we could hear something scratching the paneling on the side of the house. Naturally, we blew it off as a stray animal, so we continued watching TV. About 30 minutes to an hour later, Bev ran into the living room and locked the front door and shut the blinds. We were curious as to what she was doing. Me and my brother, being kids, got scared and started crying. Then Bev said everything would be okay. It was just a peeping Tom. So she took us upstairs and we went to her parents' room with the Nintendo and some snacks. She said stay put and not to touch anything we didn't bring into the room. Not a minute later, after she walked out of the room, we heard a loud crash and glass shattering in the room below us. The sicko had thrown a brick from the walkway through the guest bedroom window and managed to get in. I remember Bev running into the room and pulling us into the closet and telling us we were going to play a game of hide and seek and to be very quiet. She got out of the closet and locked it from the outside latch and disappeared. Several minutes passed and we could hear a grown man screaming, come out wherever you are. I only want to play." Then I heard what sounded like water running in the bathroom across from the closet. Then it shut off. And I heard Bev yelling something at the man. It was something like, "The police are on their way. You better get out of my fucking house now! Then we could hear loud, heavy footsteps sprinting out of the room, and then sirens wailing in the distance. Bev shrieked, and we heard a loud thud on the ground below us. Bev had managed to find an old wooden bat. As the man turned a corner to go out the front door, Bev swung the bat as hard as she could, knocking the man to the floor. Dazed, he got up and tried chasing her outside, but the cops had already arrived and tackled the man on sight. My mom came home immediately and took me, my brother, and Bev back to my house. A few years later, she explained that the man was a known sex offender and had escaped from prison. In the report, he was said to be carrying a rather large knife in his pocket and had a Saturday night special tucked away in the waist of his pants.
This story happened when I was only around 9 years old. We lived in a basic 2-story house in a very small village with only about 100 people. Every year, on the 4th of July, our village had the fireworks show and all the people went to the community park to watch it together. But I couldn't go that year because I had just recently broken my arm, and the doctor told me not to go to any public places for about a week, which I was really bummed about. Just to give you a basic layout of our house, our living room was connected to our front door. If you keep walking forward, you would have got into the kitchen, take a left from there, and that's where my room was on the 1st floor. Anyway, when it was about 8:00 p.m., all of my family went to the park. I was in the living room and started watching some cartoons. About half an hour had passed. I was getting tired, so I turned off the TV and went to my bedroom. I took off my glasses and started to doze off soon. I was almost asleep when I heard the front doorknob turning. I thought it was my family getting back from the park. So I got up and looked out of my room. I hadn't put my glasses back on, so everything was a bit blurry. But I could see clearly that there was only one person in the window. Seeing that not everybody was in front of the door, I felt a little scared, so I shut my bedroom's door and went back to my bed. But then, I heard the door open and then close. I immediately noticed that I didn't lock the door, which my mom had asked me to do before she left. I wanted to punch myself. Then I heard a faint voice say, "Hello, is anybody home? I have some candy. I can give it to you if you want. Just come out of the room that you're in." I quickly got off my bed and hid under it. I tried to be as quiet as possible, but because of my arm, it hurt so bad that I started crying. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone, so it was impossible to call the police. The man was walking towards the kitchen. Soon, he opened my room's door, and I covered my mouth to not make any noises. I saw the man walk up to my bed and stop. He leaned all the way down slowly, and then I saw his face. He had chapped lips and a really scruffy chin, and he was smiling. My heart dropped. I hit my arm on my bed frame when he grabbed me out from under my bed, and next, he made me stand up. He said, "Why don't you come with me? I have lots of candy at my house," which made me so scared. I couldn't move or say anything but just cried while he stared at my face. He then picked me up and started carrying me outside. I kicked and screamed. He tried to get in the white van. He tried to open the door and I managed to fall loose and landed right on my back in the grass. I got up as quick as I could and made a run all the way to the park. I found my family and told them everything that just happened to me while crying. My dad called the police as we got in the car to go to the hospital since I felt so much pain in my arm. All that I remember was I had woken up in a hospital bed with a different colored cast on my arm. After that, we got home and the police were still there. They caught the man under my bed. They said that he was probably waiting for me to come back home. He actually had a criminal record of pedophilia, sexual assault, rape, and murder. The police said that he had escaped 2 days ago and they've been looking for him since. My family has moved to a bigger town since then. I hate to think about what might have happened if I wasn't able to get loose of his grip. But it comes to my mind every day. I recently moved out to attend university in a different town, so I rented a flat where I live alone. Every morning, I took my bicycle, which I keep in the basement of my building, and went to my lectures. Usually, the neighborhood is quiet, but one night around 1 o'clock a.m., my door phone rang. This was unusual, but I brushed it off as a mistake from someone who got drunk. It rang again, but I kept ignoring it. This happened at least 3 different times, so it began to annoy me. One day, I returned from my lecture and found a bus ticket placed on my door handle. This ticket was from a bus in my hometown, and it appeared to be mine, as the bus number on it was the bus that I frequently used. At this moment, I started to get concerned that someone was pranking me. That same night, I kept my front window a bit open to keep an eye on the entrance. I live on the 2nd floor, so it's too high for anyone to climb. I shut the lights and waited. And at that moment, the door phone rang again. This time, I checked through the window and there was a shadowy figure of a man. He waited for about 5 minutes and then left. I considered calling the police, but I had nothing to report besides a strange man ringing my door phone late at night, so I soon ignored it. But what happened some days after almost made me go crazy. It was around 3 a.m. and the door phone rang again. By this time though, I heard the front door shut. Someone must have forgotten to lock it, so I assumed that the man was now inside the building. Terrified, I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I had. Then I stood behind the front door and waited. The doorbell rang. I think my stomach dropped at that point. He rang again, and then knocked strongly. I stayed frozen for an eternity until I couldn't hear anything. I was relieved, and went to sleep after a while, which in hindsight was very stupid, as I should have made sure that the man had left the building. The following morning, as I was leaving for my lecture, I noticed some scratches near the front door's handle, as if someone had tried to mess with the lock. I immediately went to my landlord, who lives right above me, and explained everything that had been going on. He reassured me that everything would be fine. So I went to get my bike, but as I walked towards the basement door, I noticed that the lock was broken. I finally understood. The man from last night must have hidden in there. I hadn't heard the front door shut again yesterday, so that must have meant that the man was still here. I ran upstairs again and told my landlord. He got angry, grabbed a bat, and went to check. All I could hear was struggling noises as my landlord beat that man senseless. We then called the police, who arrived a few moments later and arrested him. I still remember his face to this day, as he looked straight at me silently. It turned out that this man had been following me for days and was trying to rob my house. He had done the same thing to other people in the past. I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but I assume he is in prison. I am forever grateful to my landlord for being so brave. We replaced the locks on every door, so now I feel safer. Well, I would have forgotten about this if I didn't open my mailbox recently and find another bus ticket.